Welcome to Restoring the Mind. My name is Khalid Mahmood, and today my guest is once again Thomas Pochari. He writes for World Affairs Monthly. Welcome to Restoring the Mind, Tom.
Hey, good to talk to you again, Khaled. It's been a while, and I know you got a bit of a cough, but you'll be okay.
Thank you. Let's start with Ukraine. Remind me, why did Putin invade Ukraine? What is so important about Eurasia?
Well, most so-called experts would probably say that it's complex, right? And it is complex. There's no doubt. There's truth to that. However, I'm going to say that this is really all about the Cold War and World War II international structure, international relations. I'm sure the audience understands what the structure of the world that was created in the wake of at the conclusion of World War II, and then you have this Cold War coming into play, and so you have a world that's really built around those two major forces, right? Communism, the threat of communism, or the communist capitalism conflict, right? Cold War, and then you have this World War II uh, resolution, the end of World War II. So it's probably fair to say that Ukraine happened mostly because this period of history, that is the Cold War, World War II structure, is winding down, and it's been winding down for some decades now. It's been a while, and finally we get kind of to the close to the end of this period, right, of history. So if historians want to get excited about beginnings and ends of eras, they usually do, even though there's really no beginning and end. You follow what I'm saying? This could be, this probably is the end of that period, right? It's the end. And Mr. Putin, he's a very clever guy. I mean, I have to say, I think he's on, I'm going to joke around, he's on my level. I think he's understood this. And so he realized that this world that was, like I said, I'm repeating myself, the World War II, then Cold War, that world is collapsing. Is coming to an end. So now, I recently wrote, to answer your question though specifically, and it is complex, the answer, but I wrote an article recently at World Affairs Monthly, worldaffairsmonthly.com, titled "The Four Principal Sources of the Conflict in Ukraine," and June 4th, I published that. So here are the four, and I'm going to be very brief. Number one, reverse Zionism. So let's just imagine that the Israeli nation is pretty much unwinding as well. Like, I talked to my friend Victor Ostrovsky, former Mossad, and he wrote a book in 1990, I think it was, kind of like a well, he basically told what was going on in Mossad, and boy, they got really angry and they wanted to kill him. But he agreed with me that most Israelis, Ashkenazi Jews, Israeli citizens in Israel, say under the age of 30 or so, roughly, do not want to stay in Israel. They want to see if they can get out of Israel. They want the hell out of there. Right. That's number one. Number two, he agreed with me that, and I said, look, a lot of Ashkenazi Jews, and it's not going to be polite to say this, but they're crazy. So, I'm not a psychiatrist, and nor are you, but we kind of know who crazy people are when we see them. They're just unstable. They don't know what they're doing. So it seems to be a pretty good argument that the Zionist project was a really pretty misguided and foolish thing. But they're there, they're committed, and they're claiming big success. But the fact is, maybe they want to go back to the Pale of Settlement, and that's where Ukraine is. Okay, that's number one. Now Ostrovsky disagreed that they do, but I don't, I don't really care. I know they do. Number two, the Ashkenazi Jews who totally rule the United States, they want access to Russian crude oil, Russia's equally large reserves of mineral resources and natural resources. They want to topple Putin. And the way to get in there and get access to this resource, basically what Iraq was, the same reason, get in there, get the oil, get control of the oil, pump out more oil, because we have an oil problem. And everybody realizes that now. Maybe the public's beginning to see, oh yeah, it's $7 a gallon, it's $8 a gallon, or it's $15 a liter, or whatever. It's going up pretty fast. So people want more oil, and one way to get it is to get Putin out of there and get the Russians to just basically sell their oil for a lot cheaper, and get control of the oil. All right, and use Ukraine as a platform for achieving this, getting in there military. And that's what they were doing, since this maiden revolution, or whatever you call it. I think it was 2014 or 15, whenever that was. Okay, number three, the third reason is Mr. Putin's government in Moscow, is pretty resolute. But if you can topple them and get control of Russia, get your friendly Ashkenazi Jewish friendly regime in Russia, then you can work on toppling the Chinese government, which has been pretty tough, and you can get control of 1 billion hardworking Chinese. Okay, the factory of the whole world. And then the fourth would be, these Ashkenazi Jews are doing this to the United States, they're doing it to Europe. They want they want their enemies or their rivals, which are Caucasian people, European people, white people. I'm white. You're from Southeast Asia. I mean South Asia, but you're not white. But they fear that we are not. It's not that we're all neo-Nazis, but we're not on board with them really. Okay, and they want to basically destroy our world. So I think they were aiming to flood Ukraine with Arabs and Africans and multiracial, and that would be another way to kind of wipe out this Slavic presence in Eurasia. And the fourth reason, the fifth reason would, and I didn't say this in the article, but I could add it, is that Halford Mackinder is probably right. This British chap at the beginning of 1900s, he wrote about how you would basically be able to get control of the entire world. You'd have like total control if you could get control of Eurasia, because it's basically a geography slash he kind of created geopolitics. So it's all about geography. So if you can get control of key areas, then you can express your power really, really, really well. And say if you're really smart, you get control of China, you get control of Russia. You get control of 1 billion people working hard in China. You get control of natural resources in Russia. Huge. So then you control the world, and that's really what's going to happen. So America is just like Britain, but we're far away. So I predict that America will really not be able to make it. So that's I guess that's answering your question, right?
Okay, let me ask you a couple of questions on what you just said. Okay,
Sure.
I mean, I've been reading as well that the Americans and the West actually do want to destroy Russia and want to kind of split it up into
Exactly.
a
Yeah.
number of countries, but maybe five of them.
Yeah.
Right? But
Yeah.
I
Sure.
mean, this is not 1917,
Right.
and this whole idea, is it anything more than a wet dream of the West?
Well, that's a good question, and but that I've talked to Jim Kunstler, my friend Jim Kunstler. He's a Jewish guy, Ashkenazi Jew, and he was a peak oil, and he's a good guy. Kind of used to be left wing because as all Jews are, but he recently scoffed at me when I said the Ashkenazi Jews who rule the United States want to topple Putin for the resources. He liked the idea of Ashkenazi Jews going for Iraq. That's okay, but he says, oh, it's a wet dream. No, I don't think so. I think it's a real problem. This is Iraq number two, but we're not looking at Iraq. We're not looking at kind of
Yeah, but this is
very
not 19. This is not 1917, is it?
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think the argument is that, well, usually I don't want to brag, but usually I know what I'm talking about. No, this is very serious. This is the onset of one of the largest conflicts in the entire history of the world.
Okay, let me ask you a second question. What you
Yeah,
just said earlier about reverse Zionism.
yeah,
I mean, where is the evidence for that? I mean, I do not really see it
yeah,
anywhere in the media mentioned that they want to. I mean, I did read one or two articles in the Haaretz where
right.
some of Israelis actually wrote that creating Israel was a bad idea and everything.
Yeah, that's right.
But I think the mainstream media is really trying to avoid it, and even anybody else would kind of fear mentioning anything like this for the fear being labeled anti-Semitic or something.
Right.
But where is the evidence for reverse Zionism?
Well, I think you could
What,
say a
what
few
makes
things.
what makes you think that reverse Zionism is in the early stages or at any stage is happening?
Well, there's a couple of arguments you could make, and here it is. Number one, I put it out there, about a month ago or two, whatever it is, and no one has picked up on it. No one's discussed it. Okay, that when you don't see it in the media, then you may be onto something. Okay, number one. Number two, the demographic contrast, or whatever you want to call it, of the Palestinian or Arab population in the Fertile Crescent and even at Israel itself versus the demographic profile of Israel they stand in stark contrast. So in another 25, 30 years, there will be so many more Arabs that the Israeli population, or Ashkenazi Jew and Sephardic population, will be swamped. So they will not really be able to be viable as a nation with so few Jews there, right? It will be swamped by Arabs. And the Arabs don't really need to have weapons. They can just keep having big families. And in 24, so the future is grim in that respect. The third reason is that um, you do see, well, like I said, you can. No one's going to talk about it, but most young Israelis, I would say mostly Ashkenazi, they want to live a good life. They want, like you, everybody does, right? And I think, many Ukrainians want to join the EU for the same reason. Why not, right? Okay. So, and all the mestizos want to flood into California or Arizona and New Mexico, which they are doing. So people want to improve their situation. They want to get more income, and they want to go where there's affluence, prosperity, this kind of thing. So there is no chance that Israel really looks like a very stable, hey, we're doing well. They're killing Palestinian children, like 30 a year. I can't remember the number. They're blowing them away with high-powered rifles. I mean, it's anybody with any common sense is going to go to Israel and say, I'm not okay. I'm not participating in this. So I think it's just young people don't really share the same kookiness. Young Jewish people in Ashkenazis are not the same kooks that their grandparents or their parents were. So it's ending. Now I know most people probably don't agree with me, and like I said, Ostrovsky, Mossad guy, he disagreed, but I know I'm right. So I told Hamas that founders of Hamas this 25 years ago when I met them, and they agreed with me. So it takes time. But okay, then what was your so that yeah, I think that's the argument. I think we're looking at a really critical moment in history where a lot of people around the world are are really insecure. Like for example, the Chinese government has been doing this hyper development project since 1980 or whatever, about 40 years, and they're really successful, but they want to keep control of China. They don't want to be toppled. And the Russian government is in the same situation. Finally, they're emerging from this Jewish communist nightmare called the Soviet Union. Well, they liked the Soviet Union, but they didn't like the stupid economic policies. And so they're emerging from that. So they're pretty insecure. And then you got the Jews who are insecure, the Sephardic Jews and the Israeli Jews who, I mean, these Ashkenazi Jews who said, "Oh, well, wait a minute, this is kind of kooky. We want out, and they want to go back home.
Okay.
No one's going to
Uh,
take them in Europe." By the way, the fourth argument: no one's going to take them in Europe. No one's going to take them in the United States, right? Who wants them?
okay.
Okay. Does that
Let's
sound reason?
yeah,
Does that sound
it
reasonably
sounds reasonable.
persuasive? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to the next question.
Okay.
It seems Russia is winning the war in Ukraine, but the West is adamant that it wants to fight the Russians to the last Ukrainian. How much longer can this war carry on in Ukraine?
Well, in the early days when we were talking about this, I didn't really say too much, but I think I will be more specific in my so-called predictions right now. This Zelensky guy, by the way, he's Jewish, the so-called elected president of Ukraine, he has admitted that it's costing, I think, what did he say? $5 billion a day. What was it? Let me check that. Um, okay. Hold
It's
on.
okay. No, the numbers don't matter. Carry on.
No, $5 billion a month. Okay,
Okay.
excuse me, not a day. That's insane. $5 billion a month to fund the war. Okay, now I tweet this on June 29th. Do you really think the bankrupt USA or even Europe is going to fund this indefinitely? I'm going to say that this war is going to go on for about 4 years. My hunch, and just my intuition, and the Russians have no urgency to conclude this thing. They're just going to take their time. They're going to completely destroy Ukraine. Yeah, completely destroy it, meaning they're going to destroy the infrastructure. Now they don't want to, but they're being forced to. And the reason they're being forced to is because the United States is funding, sending weapons. The World Bank, everybody's funding this thing in the West so far. They're funding it, but I think Putin and the Russians want to basically build Ukraine as a military bulwark, and they will after about 4 years, and they'll start building factories there, tank factories. They're going to build a lot. They're going to totally rebuild Ukraine, and then they're going to build up Ukraine as a military platform to go further south. Because I believe that the United States is really kind of finished, and the Russians are realizing, okay, along with the Chinese, that somebody's got to go into Arabia and make sure the oil doesn't go into crazy. They want to get the oil.
Okay.
Yeah.
4
People are
years
going
is
to
a
get.
long time. 4 years is a long time. And
Yeah.
do you not think that the war will spread if it carries on for 4 years?
No, I doubt it, because wars are so expensive, and I don't think the United States can afford it. I don't think the Europeans can afford it. So it may end sooner, but the United States spent about $1 trillion in Afghanistan, right?
Yeah,
Apparently, and it went on 20
two,
years,
two
right?
trillion, 2 trillion.
Yeah. Oh, well, okay. I don't know. At least $1 trillion. Okay. And that went on for 20 years, and nobody expected it to go on for 20 years. So I think the the likelihood of it going on a long time is quite, in my opinion, is quite high, because you see these Russians are not going to be able to ethically cleanse. What they really want to do is separate the folks in Ukraine, the Slavs, by the way, they're Slavs, in Ukraine that want to get kind of out of the Russian orbit. They want a little independence, this kind of thing, pro Jew, call them. And then they want the pro Slav guys to be on their side. But, it's a big mess. And I don't know what the ratio is there. Maybe I'm saying probably 10% are pro-Jew of Slavs there, 10%. So they need to kind of isolate them and get rid of them or whatever. Or I don't know what they're going to do, but and the rest of them are going to go along. But they have a big problem, because it was the same in Vietnam, same in right in Afghanistan. It was the same in Algeria. It just goes on and on until people go broke.
Yeah.
But the Russians, the more they prolong this, the more the United States goes broke. The higher the price of oil goes. Got it? You got it? I mean, The Russians have all the leverage. The ruble has skyrocketed. I tweeted about this. It's now it's corrected just a little bit. It's at 55. I mean, when the first Russian tanks started rolling in, the American Jews and the all the puppets Biden, they said, oh, it's going to go to ruble's going to go to 100, 150, and it went to 100, and then after about 2 weeks, it started correcting. I mean, it started strengthening, and it went from 100 to 50.
Okay.
So we know who's winning.
True. Okay. What next after Ukraine? How do you see the future of war? Can you predict the next domino to fall? I mean, if you look at it, excuse me,
Yeah,
we had after 9/11 we had the Afghanistan well, then Iraq, then Libya, then Syria, then and now Ukraine. So who next?
yeah.
I mean, these
Well, uh,
military machine has to kind of needs another
yeah.
victim.
Well, it's foolhardy to try to predict the future, but I like doing it, and I'm pretty good at it. But I would say that the likely scenario is this: the willingness to escalate is not really there. Obviously, right? There's a reluctance to escalate. However, people get pretty emotional and people get angry, and I detect a lot of delusional thinking coming from the Western capitals. Kind of wacky delusional thinking. So you never know. But I'm going to say that probably what's going to happen is that after another year or so of this, the Ukrainians will have run out of money. There'll be no money. They can't. In fact, they're even talking about becoming, really frigid this winter. Right? They're going to freeze. They're not going to be able to heat their homes if they have a home. So it's going to be pretty grim. And the grimmer it gets, the more people around the world realize that we're at the end of the World War II Cold War structure. You see what I'm saying?
Hmm.
And that the IMF and the World Bank and American leaders and democracy, by the way, the fundamental reason, that's what I forgot to mention earlier, the fundamental reason that what's next, you ask, okay, democracy and where everybody votes is truly now going to be considered um, a liability. Because, for example, I argued 30 years ago, I argued when the Berlin Wall came down, and I was pretty famous then and I'd be influential, but I argued we should not expand NATO, right? We should take it easy with the Russians, be kind of, maybe not cuddly with them, but be respectful and take it easy with them. Don't get aggressive. But the American Jews, they wanted to, they didn't like the Russians. They never liked the Russians, and they have these grudges that go back 100 years, and they wanted to go after Russia. So here we are. So it's democracy. If we had like a dictator or a smart guy in charge, I'm not saying myself, but I'm joking. But someone who could basically rule like Machiavelli recommended, and decide policy, not have a bunch of women talking about policy. What do they know? All these stupid people saying all these stupid things. We need to have shrewd policy, and because we've had the opposite of shrewd policy. We've had foolish policy, foolish beyond belief. We are now at this point where the whole world, everybody might be destroyed. Isn't that amazing?
Yes.
So we're coming to realize that we cannot allow policy to be decided by a bunch of nincompoops, men, incompetent men, or crazy men, or women talking out of their butt, whatever, right? You have to have extremely shrewd, competent men, mostly men, who are really, to know what they're talking about, and they decide, and that's the way it is.
Okay. Okay. I think that was my final question. And
Yeah.
any last comments? Anything else you want to add to it about your website or?
Well, I I'm glad you called me, and it's always good talking to you, Khaled, because I know we can always, you and I always connect, and we understand each other. It's a very tragic moment in history. It is. But I would say that the chances of emerging from this with a more enlightened outlook, and more uh, shrewd cognition of our problem is quite good. I'm actually somewhat optimistic. That's because I've been telling you for a long time the price of moving information around the world, the cost of doing it, right, is now very low and everybody can get involved. Information is now the supreme power. So if we can accept that information is supreme power and we can have a discussion and about these problems, like the European Union seemed to have agreed to let me interview their ambassador, a Greek fellow, and they probably will, but they sent me an email. I put it up on my website, worldaffairsmonthly.com. I have a scrolling text, which is really cool, and I put it up there that I'm going to interview him, and they emailed me just before I talked to you and said, "Hey, it hasn't been confirmed yet, so take it down." so, so I think we just all of us, the Pakistan, the Dravidians, the Chinese, the Arabs, the mestizos, the Europeans, the everybody around the world has to get together and say, "All right, this world is not going to stay the same. It's going away, right? It's going away, this old world. Now, what do we do?" And we have to have a really super duper realistic and high level discussion about what we do, and not the bullshit, not the lies coming out of Washington, like we're going to bring, like, for example, Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson wants to liberate, he wants to bring Ukraine into the EU. Well, he just took the UK out of the EU. What a goddamn buffoon, right? Why
Mhm.
do the British people put up with this buffoon? You
True.
there?
Yeah,
I
I'm
mean,
here.
he wants to bring Ukraine into the EU, and he just left. He just brought he was all in favor of bringing the EU. I mean, Britain out of the EU. It's insane. Stupid idiot that guy is. He's a total buffoon.
Yeah, but saying is one thing, doing it is another, isn't it?
Well, okay, but the fact is, he's talking about how important it is for Ukraine to get into the EU, right?
But that's just a political statement, I think. I don't think they would
I
actually
know,
go
I
ahead with
know.
it. I mean, first thing is, UK itself has pulled out of Europe. Remember the Brexit? So,
Yeah,
uh,
I'm saying they pulled out, and
yeah.
here you have a head of state of UK that pulled out of the EU, advocating that Ukraine get into the EU.
And that says everything.
Yeah,
Okay.
it says everything. So
Okay.
I
Will
think,
you?
yeah, the
Oh,
final statement I'll make is that we just cannot tolerate these incompetent leaders. We can no longer tolerate them. We have to remove them.
sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Agreed.
Pakistan and all over the place. And Putin, Mr. Putin, I think is finally bit the, what do you call it? Bit the thing off, and he said, "Okay, we're not gonna mess around anymore. I'm rich guy. But I have to look out for the Slavs. The Slavs are important. I've got to develop the Slavic world." And he compared himself to Peter the Great, which is good because that's what Peter the Great did. That's why he's called Peter the Great. All right, I've finished my speech. What do you think? Any final thoughts on your part?
Uh, I think to large extent I agree with your argument. Okay, but however, having said that, I do think that there is a war coming in the Middle East. I think,
Yeah,
especially in the Arab countries, the population there is really fed up of
yeah, they're fed up. Yeah,
their leaders.
I
So
told you
pretty soon,
they don't have. Yeah, can I
pretty soon,
interrupt?
they will topple their leadership, and not only there,
Yes,
but also in other places. So
yes,
when I asked for the domino, which would fall next. And I think
okay,
I would predict that the Middle East has been set up as the arena for the the wars and everything.
yeah,
And after Ukraine, I think it is likely that the war will shift back to the Middle East again. So
Okay.
that is my prediction
Okay.
about. As far as Putin is concerned, I think Euro-Asia is very important, and I do think that Ukraine was necessary to create the what do you call it this weakening of the West. I mean, you can
Yeah.
going Putin when Putin went to Ukraine. I think he must have calculated how much West would be willing to waste their money into into
Yeah, you're
Ukraine.
right. Waste your money. That's
Yes.
exactly what he's doing. Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
and he has calculated quite well. And the West is kind of losing quite a lot. The more they pour into it, the more they are losing,
Yeah.
and they're only making their suffering prolong, and suffering get worse and worse. So eventually, this the debts which the West is into, I think it is necessary for them to kind of bankers to write it off, but they won't. So a lot of countries are going to go bankrupt,
Yeah.
default.
Yeah.
So we are going to witness quite a lot of defaults as a result of this war in Ukraine, and a lot of
Okay.
these defaults will be kind of in the West as well. Although a lot of people are putting their bets on the southern countries, the developing countries to default. Maybe some people are kind of mentioning Pakistan. The Pakistan might default, like
Yeah,
Sri
that's right.
Lanka did. Sri
Yeah.
Lanka, but I would say even the West is likely to default.
I agree. I agree. Well, it sounds like you got to go rest and take care of that cough. But look, why don't we talk sometime whenever you want about the Middle East?
Yeah,
But I agree. Remember, our first discussion was about the consequences or the implications of Afghanistan, and I predicted that there would be regimes falling. And I think everybody's going to have to look at their own little backyard and say, am I doing a good job or is this a disaster? And most people are going to have to admit it's a disaster, right?
true, true. Okay, we'll leave it
And
at that.
okay, all right.
Thank you.
Talk to you later, Kevin.